The Garden of Eden, the fall, Adam's deep sleep, why Adam didn't wake up. I hope you will stay with me until the end. This is a powerful story of inspiration for our generation, filled with breathtaking biblical wisdom, including many passages from the Old Testament and the prophets. This 17-minute journey may open minds to the profound revelations of Jesus. You won't want to miss it. The illusion of separation from God. The fundamental misuse of knowledge, referred to in the Bible as the cause of the fall, or separation. Now, there are some definitions to take from the dictionary which will be helpful here. They are somewhat unusual since they are not the first definitions which are given. Nevertheless, the fact that each of them does appear in the dictionary should be reassuring. To project, a verb, means to extend forward or out. To project, a noun, means a plan in the mind. World means a natural grand division. We will refer later to projection as related to mental states. We have already observed that man can create an empty shell, but he cannot create nothing at all. This emptiness provides the screen for the misuse of projection. The Garden of Eden, which is described as a literal garden in the Bible, was not an actual garden at all. Even Bible scholars realize that this story cannot be literal. And as we explained in previous videos, even the Apostle Paul said it was written in correspondences, and Jesus only spoke in parables. But as for the Garden of Eden, for early humanity, it was merely a mental state of complete need-lack. This meaning that humanity lived with God and had no needs. Even in the literal account, it is noteworthy that the pre-separation state was essentially one in which man needed nothing. The tree of knowledge is also an overly literal figure. These concepts need to be clarified before the real meaning of the separation, or the detour into fear, can be fully understood. To project, as defined before, is a fundamental attribute of God. In the creation, God projected his creative ability from himself to the souls he created, and he also imbued them with the same loving will to create. The soul has not only been fully created, but has also been created perfect. There is no emptiness in it. Because of its likeness to its creator, it is creative. No child of God can lose this ability, because it is inherent in what he is, but he can use it inappropriately. Whenever projection is used inappropriately, it always implies that some emptiness or lack exists, and that it is in man's ability to put his own ideas there instead of truth. If you consider carefully what this entails, the following will become quite apparent. First, the assumption is implicit that what God created can be changed by the mind of man. Second, the concept that what is perfect can be rendered imperfect, so then, with man, wanting is accepted. Third, the belief that man can distort the creations of God, including himself, is accepted. Fourth, the idea that since man can create himself, the direction of his own creation is up to him is implied. Whatever we do because we are free to do it and choose to do it becomes as much a part of us as if we were made that way, and will remain part of us. This is because our self-image and our freedom make a whole. Our self-image is formed from our life, and whatever is done from our life is done in freedom. Our self-image is also formed from our love, for love is our life, and whatever is done from love is done in freedom. Doing something, because we are free to do it and choose to do it, means that whatever is formed from our life and our love is something we have thought and decided. And what we have decided we do in freedom according to our thought. Whatever we do from our intention and our understanding. Freedom is an aspect of our will and thought an aspect of our understanding. These related distortions represent a picture of what actually occurred in the separation. None of this existed before, nor does it actually exist now. The world was made as a natural grand division, or a projecting outward of God. That is why everything that he created is like him. Projection, as undertaken by God, is very similar to the kind of inner radiance which the children of the Father inherit from him. It is important to note that the term project outward necessarily implies that the real source of projection is internal. This is as true of Jesus' projection. The world, in the original connotation of the term, included both the proper creation of man by God and the proper creation by man in his right mind. The latter, the proper creation by man in his right mind, required the endowment of man by God with free will, because all loving creation is freely given. Nothing in these statements implies any sort of level involvement, or in fact anything except one continuous line of creation in which all aspects are of the same order. When the lies of the serpent were introduced, they were specifically called lies because they are not true. When man listened, all he heard was untruth. He does not have to continue to believe what is not true unless he chooses to do so. All of his miscreations can literally disappear in the twinkling of an eye because they are merely visual misperceptions. Man's spiritual eye can sleep, but a sleeping eye can still see. What is seen in dreams seems to be very real. The Bible mentions that a deep sleep fell upon Adam, and nowhere is there any reference to his waking up. The history of man in the world as he sees it has not yet been marked by any genuine or comprehensive reawakening or rebirth. This is impossible as long as man projects in the spirit of miscreation. It still remains within him, however, to project as God projected his own spirit to him. In reality, this is his only choice because his free will was given him for his own joy in creating the perfect. The voice of the Lord was heard in the garden. That is, the guidance of the church was not affected by following an outward rule of life, but by an inward listening to the Lord's voice as it uttered its message in their souls. It was a beautiful life, too beautiful indeed for us, to whom the Lord must come in such a different way to form any adequate idea of it. The man, the Adam, in Hebrew, Adam means humanity, dwelt alone in the garden. How significant this is when once we learn what is meant in the Bible by living alone. Think, those who look to the Heavenly Father and trust in all things to his guidance are, in the Bible, said to be alone. External things of mere doctrinal knowledge, things that make one conscious of one's individuality, are not in the affections and thoughts of such highly developed people. They live alone with the Lord. Balaam, in speaking of the future of Israel as the Lord's people, said, "Lo, the people shall dwell alone." Moses, on one occasion, in speaking of Israel, said, "Israel shall dwell in safety alone." A prophet of the olden time exhorted Israel, saying, "Arise, get you up to the wealthy nation that dwelleth without care, saith the Lord, which have neither gates nor bars, which dwell alone." Of course, we all see that by dwelling alone was not meant individual solitude. So of Adam. As Adam is the name of the church of the childhood of the race, his being alone means that the celestial church lived alone with the Lord, that it was led and influenced solely by the divine guidance from within. We have no means of determining how long this single leadership of the Lord, this dwelling alone with him, lasted. A very considerable length of time must have elapsed before the Adamic people began to turn to self and thus away from the Lord. But there ultimately came a posterity of the most ancient church that inclined to their proprium, their egos, or ownhood, that entertained the thought of and desire to possess the consciousness of an individuality apart from the Lord. All fear, or lack of love, is ultimately reducible to the basic misperception that man has the ability to usurp the power of God, with his ego. It can only be emphasized that he neither can nor has been able to do this. This thought, this desire, grew from generation to generation until finally the ownhood, the personal individuality, had such prominence given to it that the sole leading of the Lord was no longer possible. This state, when it was formed, is what is meant by the words, "And the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone." Here we come to the story of Adam's deep sleep. Don't think of a man going to sleep physically. The sleep described here was a spiritual sleep. St. Paul exhorts spiritual sleepers where he says, "Awake, thou that sleepest, and Christ shall give thee light." The mind is not simply a thinking faculty, it is a spiritual organism created in discrete planes of consciousness. This was true of the people called Adam. Now, when the most ancient church ceased to desire to be alone with the Lord, the very highest plane of life is that Adam fell into a state of spiritual sleep. The Lord's love was no longer active on that plane. Deep sleep brooded over it. This was Adam's sleep. Falling into this sleep, the Adamic people would have utterly destroyed all heavenly life in themselves if it had not been for the tender mercy of the Lord. They inclined to their selfhood, and it would have swallowed them up. Think of the Lord's mercy. Adam sleeps. The highest life of the church has ceased. But while Adam sleeps, the Lord takes one of his ribs and closes up the flesh instead. And that rib he builds into a woman. So runs the allegory. What does it mean? Remember, it is the religious condition of the most ancient church that is treated of in this story of the rib built into a woman. Remember that, and the whole narrative becomes clear. And Jehovah God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in the place thereof. By a rib, which is a bone of the chest, is meant man's own, in which there is but little, I repeat, little vitality, and indeed an own, something egoistic the man loves, which is dear to him. By flesh in the place of the rib is meant an own in which there is, again, there is, spiritual vitality. By a deep sleep is meant the state into which he was let so that he might seem to himself to have what is his own, which state resembles sleep, because while in it he knows not but that he lives, thinks, speaks, and acts from himself. But when he begins to know that this is false, he is then roused as it were out of sleep and becomes awake. As an example, to me, I sometimes see this when one may be living it up in this life, from him or herself, and a tragedy may suddenly arise. A loved one killed instantly, a child dies suddenly, someone is diagnosed with a devastating disease or bodily injury. Just something shocking that often makes people wake up, or again begin to think differently than before, about our short lives on earth. But the reason why what is man's own, and indeed an own which is dear to him, is called a rib, which is a bone of the chest, is that among the most ancient people the chest signified charity, because it contains both the heart and the lungs. And bones signified the viler things, because they possess a minimum of organ very little to no spiritual vitality, as upcoming passages in Isaiah will reveal, while flesh denoted such as those that did have spiritual vitality. The ground of these significations is one of the deepest arcana known to the men of the most ancient church, concerning which of the Lord's divine mercy hereafter. In the word also man's own is signified by bones, and indeed an own vivified by the Lord, as in Isaiah. Again, Jehovah shall satisfy thy soul in droughts and make thy bones alert, and thou shalt be like a watered garden, Isaiah 58:11. Then shall ye see, and your heart shall rejoice, and your bones shall sprout as the blade, Isaiah 66:14. In David, all my bones shall say, Jehovah, who is like unto thee, Ps 35:10. This is still more evident from Ezekiel, where he speaks of bones receiving flesh and having spirit put into them. The hand of Jehovah set me in the midst of the valley, and it was full of bones. And he said to me, Prophesy upon these bones, and say unto them, O ye dry bones, hear the word of Jehovah. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah to these bones, Behold, I bring breath, spiritus, into you, and ye shall live, and I will lay sinews upon you, and will make flesh come upon you, and cover you with skin, and I will put breath, spiritus, in you, and ye shall live, and ye shall know that I am Jehovah. Ezekiel 37:1-4-6. The own of man, the lack of love, lack of charity, the ego things in life, when viewed from heaven, appears like something that is wholly bony, inanimate, and very ugly, consequently as being in itself dead. But when spiritually vivified by the Lord, it looks like flesh. For man's own is a mere dead thing, although to him it appears as something, indeed as everything. Whatever lives in him is from the Lord's life. And if this were withdrawn, he would fall down as dead as a stone. For man is only an organ of life, and such as is the organ, such is the life's affection. The Lord alone has what is his own. By this own he redeemed man, and by this own he saves him. The Lord's own is life, and from his own, man's own, which in itself is dead, is made alive. The Lord's own is also signified by the Lord's words in Luke, A spirit hath not flesh and bones as ye see me have, Luke 24:39. It was also meant by not a bone of the pastoral lamb being broken, Exodus 12:46. The state of man when in his own, or when he supposes that he lives from himself, is compared to deep sleep, and indeed by the ancients was called deep sleep, and in the word it is said of such that they have poured out upon them the spirit of deep sleep, Isaiah 29:10, and that they sleep asleep, Jeremiah 51:57. We hope that this helped to explain that a man's own is in itself dead, and that no one has any life from himself has been shown. Those who love nothing but their own and obstinately insist that they live from themselves are often convinced by sensible experience and confess that they do not live from themselves. So now what? Stick with me until the end. So with these lies the real justification for man's escape from this, to awake. The escape is brought about by his acceptance of the atonement, which places him in a position to realize that his own errors never really occurred. When the deep sleep fell upon Adam, he was in a condition to experience nightmares because he was asleep. If a light is suddenly turned on while someone is dreaming a fearful dream, he may initially interpret the light itself as a part of his own dream and be afraid of it. However, when he awakens, the light is correctly perceived as the release from the dream, which is no longer accorded reality. It is quite apparent that this release does not depend on the kind of knowledge, which is nothing more than deceiving lies. The knowledge which illuminates rather than obscures is the knowledge which not only sets you free, but which also shows you clearly that you are free. Whatever lies you may believe are of no concern to the miracle, which can heal any of them with equal ease. It makes no distinctions among misperceptions. Its sole concern is to distinguish between truth on the one hand and all kinds of errors on the other. Some miracles may seem to be of greater magnitude than others. But remember that there is no order of difficulty in miracles. In reality, you are perfectly unaffected by all expressions of lack of love. These can be either from yourself and others, or from yourself to others, or from others to you. Peace is an attribute in you. You cannot find it outside. All unhappiness is some form of external searching. Quiet happiness is inner peace. It enables you to remain unshaken by lack of love from without and capable through your own miracles of correcting the external conditions which proceed from lack of love in others. Humanity needs a celestial speed-up from all of the hereditary drag of the lack of love that has occurred since Adam, or humanity, fell and hasn't awakened yet as we went through. Humanity simply needs to awaken to the divine love within, from Jesus. We did make a short video on lack of love, and we'll be going deeper into this in future videos. Thanks for watching. We have more to share. Consider watching one of the videos on the screen and subscribing if you haven't already for our new videos. Thanks again.